powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, this is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Geoff Mosher is here today. The Eagles report to camp tomorrow. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to do much on the field tomorrow, but they'll all be in the building for the most part. We'll take a look at the Eagles and more. Geoff Mosher is here from InsideTheBirds.com and the Inside the Birds podcast, and you can check that out on all podcasting platforms. And he joins us via the Elite Acura hotline. Visit Elite Acura during the summer performance event located on Route 73 North in Maple Shade, online at EliteAcura.com. Mosh, it's Christmas Eve. It's training camp Eve. How are you, my friend?
Oh, I'm great. It is Christmas Eve. It's that time again. We all get very excited for this moment. Sometimes I'm not sure why. No, because a lot of what happens for the first 2 or 3 weeks is, it's not even a talking point by the time the season starts. But it is always fun. Obviously, the players have to reconvene. Sometimes news comes out of that because there have been times where guys don't pass the conditioning test and they're a little bit far behind. And, one of the biggest themes, Mike, of this training camp, well, there's two major themes, right? One is that we've talked about this for the first time in a long time, they've got real competitions. Not everything is settled right away. They've got many spots that need to be decided. And number two is, and we talk about this year after year, this is yet another modified schedule with less practice time on the field. And while that has been a winning formula for the Eagles as far as maintaining good health and successful on the field the last 2 years, you do wonder, how much further can they modify and scale back and still get everything done they need to get done when you have so much turnover, especially on defense, in both the coaching staff and personnel.
Well, Moshe, and this is the beginning of taking a look how it all comes together. The latest podcast dropped, some job positions, job battles, I should say, you guys discussed today. You also, in the previous Inside the Birds podcast, talked about the top storylines here. I want to go back to a couple of days ago, and I don't know if you guys, you probably weren't on why this happened, but Dennis Kelly signs with the Eagles, and it just adds another – he's not going to be in job for a starting position, but it shows that the Eagles wanted to add some more depth to that spot, and that's an area, that offensive line, that you wonder what those battles are going to look like. We think the starting spots, except for one, are pretty locked in. At right guard, depends on how you feel there, but it shows that they thought they needed some more depth there.
Right. That's something that we've discussed a lot over the summer, right, ever since they started. I think maybe it was in June when they were kicking the tires on DJ Fluker, bringing in a veteran there just to see it. Look, they lost a starter in Isaac Seumalo, and they lost some key depth in Andre Dillard, right? And, just 2 years ago, they lost Nate Herbig. So while they've also drafted guys like Cam Jurgens and Tyler Steen, they've lost some guys too. So, a Jack Anderson is with the Giants now, and a kid they had last year who they waived wound up getting picked up by somebody else. I can't even remember who. Coyote Awosika, right? And then they wanted to keep Josh Sills, and then he had the legal issues, and that, I don't know, has been resolved. So there's definitely a need for them to have veteran depth. And they've got a couple of guys like Fred Johnson and Roderick Robinson, who they have, but I think that they're looking for more experience, more depth, and just to see if Dennis Kelly, who is 33 years old and has some injuries in the last 3 years, see if he's got something left.
Yeah, and Kelly did play, correct me if I'm wrong, played right guard for the Eagles back in the Chip Kelly days. I think he started a couple games there. I would imagine, though, he would be more of that swing tackle that can play left tackle, right tackle, and I guess if an extreme situation has played some guard in the past, you're going back to Chip Kelly 2013.
Yeah, I feel like we have this sort of a similar conversation with Jack Driscoll. He can play right guard. He can. I'm talking Kelly now. Right guard, right tackle. I feel like if Dennis Kelly has to come in and play left tackle for you, that's not going to be an ideal situation. He did play some guard, if memory serves me correctly, for the Eagles. He also played tackle. Good guy. It's amazing he's still been in the league this long. nice veteran backup. I sense that my sense is that he'll struggle to make the 53, but you never know.
Yeah.
So
the famous question with him is who did they trade to? Who did the Eagles acquire when they traded Dennis Kelly?
Oh, that's that for me. That's an easy one because I was doing sports talk radio in Philadelphia at the time, and I was not against the trade, but I was very cautious that Dorial Green Beckham would ever do anything as an Eagle if the Eagles' plan was to just enable him the way every other team is. Here you go, you're going to start for us, right? I thought that the best way to treat Dorial Green Beckham, who had already kind of messed up in college a little bit, was on the outs with the Titans, was to make him your fourth or fifth wide receiver and make him earn his way onto the field. That's not what the Eagles did. They started him right away. He was not very good, which should have been obvious to them. And my favorite stat is over the last 6 years, Dennis Kelly has more touchdown catches than Dorial Green Beckham.
Geoff Mosher, Football at 4. So Dennis Kelly is in. Let's take a look around. Tomorrow they're going to get in here. Some of the previews of stuff that's happening here. Offensive line, that right guard spot. Kind of give me your thoughts on what the storyline is on who gets that job, on how that all happens.
Well, I think if you were to handicap it, you would give Tyler Steen the slight edge over Cam Jurgens, but I think that the Eagles themselves would like to see that happen. I think they would like a bigger body next to Jason Kelce. I brought this up before. If you have to block a 340-pound athletic behemoth like Dexter Lawrence, you're going to have to block him with two, but eventually your center is going to have to leave to go to the second level. You need to make sure your guard can hang with that guy after the center leaves, after the double team, right? And so Cam Jurgens is a light guy. So we have to see if he's strong enough. Sayamalu wasn't very heavy, but he was so strong. So Cam Jurgens would have to show that he's got the same level of strength that a Sayamalu has. And Tyler Steen is a bigger athlete, so you would imagine that he could handle that if he can learn how to play the inside where he has never played before. So the funny part is the guy that you would give the least shot of the three to, Jack Driscoll, is the only one who has actually played right guard.
Yeah. Geoff, obviously you guys have been doing your series over at InsideTheBirds.com, and some of the things that you've been kind of looking at are fringe players, guys that maybe we don't know a whole heck of a lot about. Well, tomorrow's their first chance to make, maybe not tomorrow because I don't know if they're going to do much tomorrow. They just have to report. But who are some of the fringe players that might have a shot, that might have their name called a lot, that we might be talking about like, hey, is this guy going to do enough in these preseason games? Who are some of those names that you think some of our listeners should keep an eye on?
Yeah, and this was one of my favorite stories of the preview series because I think it's the most educational, and I thought Andrew did a really good job with his 3 submissions. I like the ones I gave. 2 guys that jump out at me among them, all of the ones that we did, were Josh Jobe, who made the team last year as an undrafted free agent at corner, and he's a big corner. So he has an opportunity here to make the team again. And all he has to do is show that he's improved from last year when he made the team as an undrafted free agent. He was a part of special teams, and he's got the size to be able to play outside. And I have to think in this camp, Mike, and we'll see what happens. But, you see them scaling back so much on practice. I have a feeling that you're not going to see guys like Slay, Bradbury, Jason Kelce out there for every single practice all the time. I think that they're going to really look to get the guys who need to be coached up more reps. So I think Josh Jobe will get a lot of time. Excuse me, first or second team. And he's got to, you could say all he's got to do is beat out Greedy Williams. And I think Greedy Williams sort of has cachet because he was a second-round pick and a great athlete. But Greedy Williams was not a success story in Cleveland. And if Josh Jobe can continue, who also has great size and length, for cornerback, if he can show he can be the number 1 outside corner, then he'll make the team and be a valuable member of it.
Yeah. Another thing that I think, you mentioned the right guard spot. I think on the other side of the ball, that safety spot is kind of a similar situation where you've got Blankenship, who actually played the position here last year. Edmonds is new. You got Sidney Brown drafted. Kayvon Wallace is in here. They signed Justin Evans. I mean, it doesn't seem like there is a clear answer. But I think everybody thinks Edmonds is at least going to be one of them because they signed him. And after that, it seems like it's up in the air.
Yeah, it's like Edmonds and a bunch of question marks. And that's not to even suggest that Edmonds himself is some kind of superstar, but he's a guy who's played 5 years in the league. I don't think he's missed very many games. He's not going to play, or he has not played yet at an extremely high level, but he's been a steady presence on a very good Steelers defense. He's known for not being a great cover safety, more of a box safety who sometimes struggles with his angles and misses tackles. But like you said, experience alone gives him the leg up over pretty much everybody else at the position. And then it becomes kind of a grab bag between Reed Blankenship, Kayvon Wallace still competing, the rookie Sidney Brown. I'll tell you this. I feel like I hope this guy is great because I know the fans are sort of in love with the pick. And he's a great kid, and he's got all the leadership qualities that you want. Kind of like same thing with Nakobe Dean, right? Great kid, smart kid, instinctive kid. But I feel like the fan hype train for Sidney Brown is very different than the NFL personnel folk hype train on him. Like, they really question whether or not he can cover because he didn't have to do it a lot at the college level. Now, he did play like a free safety type position at the Senior Bowl. People were impressed with his athleticism, but, there's athleticism and then there's actually being good at coverage. Terrell Evans is a great example. He tested unbelievably coming out and was a first-round pick, but that never really translated to becoming a great coverage safety. So, it's a grab bag. I think that, any Justin Evans, I can't count him out. He's a tremendous athlete and a former second-round pick who somehow missed 3 straight years of football but was able to still stay in the league and had a pretty decent year last year for the Saints. So you got a lot of interesting possibilities here.
Yeah, no question. I think that safety position is going to be definitely fun to watch, as we know. Sean Desai as the coordinator. Now, I don't know that we've talked about this before. CBS Sports did a series of, the breakout performer. They picked Kenny Gainwell as theirs, and I would like to hear what you think about that. But I contend that, Dean is the guy on the defensive side of the ball. You go back to 2001 and their defense there. He had, at linebacker. Do you compare the linebackers and how they were used and what they did there to what the linebackers here could possibly do?
I'm sorry, did you say go back to 2001?
2021, I'm sorry.
Oh. I was like, Mike, I'm getting old, brother.
Sorry about that.
I was like, was Trotter on the team yet?
No, but the Bears, now it's interesting because on that team, the right inside linebacker was Roquan Smith. The other guy was Alec Ogletree, and then they played like a 3-4 defense, that Bears team, but they played with Ogletree, Roquan Smith, and Smith had a really, and they had Khalil Mack and Robert Quinn were the two kind of edge guys. But
that's a pretty good unit right there.
Very good unit, yes. But Roquan Smith, I don't know, would you say that you could look maybe at him and see what maybe Nakobe Dean and how he might be used, or do you not think that's a fair comparison?
Well, I think it's a little bit of an unfair comparison for a couple of reasons. If I'm not mistaken, Roquan was a bigger guy. I think I'll go check on it. At 232 pounds, maybe not as big as I thought, 6'1", 232. You know what? There are some fair comparisons, not just because they're Georgia guys also, but, the book on Nakobe Dean is he's not just a good inside linebacker, but you can blitz him. You can use him in different ways. And it'll be interesting to see if Sean Desai wants to blitz and or zone blitz him, where, you blitz him, drop somebody else into coverage and really take advantage of all of his capabilities. Roquan Smith was a first-round pick, though. I mean, the guy, if I'm not mistaken, 8th overall, beast, tested off the charts, and, Pro Bowler, everything, all of that. So Nakobe Dean still has to kind of prove that as a third-round pick. It wasn't just the injuries that or the body wear and tear that knocked Nakobe down. It was the type of linebacker that he is, more side to side, not necessarily downhill, always has to be kept clean by the defensive line in front of him. I think Roquan came out with a little bit more of a playmaker reputation, or the ability to get downhill and kind of bully a lineman who might be getting in his way.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that because my anticipation for Dean, and I don't know if it's going to work out, I could be completely off base, is that he will be that playmaking style of linebacker where the Eagles had 2 solid linebackers, plays per se. They just kind of did their job. I wonder if Desai is going to scheme more to have his linebacker make plays.
I think that's a great question, Mike. I'm really curious to see the usage for Nakobe Dean. If we're going to really compare, I feel like that if this guy can make some plays, he might give the Eagles a Jordan Hicks-like addition to, and who was another guy who was, I think, drafted in the 3rd round. And at the time, people were like, Jordan Hicks, who's this guy? Like, what are we doing? What is Chip Kelly doing? And he wound up being a very good linebacker who also, by the way, had a lot of injuries in college and did have a lot of injuries at the NFL level.
Yeah.
But that I feel like the similar build, similar usage you can find out of Jordan Hicks as you did with Nakobe Dean. But to your point, I would like to see what Sean Desai has in plans for him as far as more than just coverage linebacker or run-stopping linebacker.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think the linebacker and how he uses them, if he uses them any differently than they were used before, will be something to keep an eye on. Obviously, I mentioned Gainwell as the breakout player. I don't know, what kind of role does Gainwell have? How does he fit into the offense for you? I mean, part of the reason they picked him is because of what he did in the playoffs last year, but they did sign 2 guys. I don't know what that says, or traded for one, signed another. I don't know what that says they think about Gainwell.
Yeah, I also see him as a breakout player, but I sort of have to also understand first which running backs are making the team, right? And then once I figure that part out, like, are Rashad Penny and DeAndre Swift and Trey Sermon making this team? Then all of a sudden it's like, well, what do you do? Does that make Trey Sermon like the lightweight, pass catching back? We know he's the best, or tied with DeAndre Swift for catching the ball. So he's probably going to have a role as at least a 3rd down back, Kenneth Gainwell. But I do think there's an opportunity to get him more involved as a ball carrier. However, that's seemingly only if he doesn't have 2 other guys ahead of him on the depth chart. So we have to see how everything we really have to see how it shakes out with Rashad Penny and DeAndre Swift.
That's the big thing, right? And, I know, I think Adam said on the podcast that he thinks, and he said, nobody told me this, but that Penny will end up being the guy. Do you concur with him on that feeling?
I have a hard time. I mean, theoretically, he should be because he's a 1st-round pick. He's uber explosive, but this guy's body has been through the ringer. And at some point, well, I mean, it already has caught up to him, but I mean, you just wonder if he starts to lose some of the explosion because of all the injuries. I feel like DeAndre Swift has had the sort of label that he's injured a lot, but if you go look, he's played a lot of games. It's not like I don't think there's a season where he played only 4 games or anything like that. He has not nearly had the kind of injuries that Rashad Penny has had. So if he's kept healthy and he's in this committee here, I think DeAndre Swift could be just as much of a quote unquote breakout candidate as even Kenneth Gainwell, because I could see this guy having his first 1,100 yard type season. I don't even think he's at 1,000 yards yet, DeAndre Swift. I could see it happening if he can play at least 15 games.
Tight end room, obviously something to keep an eye on. We know Goddard, what's going to happen behind there. I think also the rotations on the defensive front, how does that all map out? It all starts tomorrow when they report to camp. And there's some other interesting storylines. The punter, right? The punter is something to keep an eye on, right?
Big storyline. In fact, I might actually I joked on the podcast, I might whip out the iPhone at practice and get the stopwatch going and start doing the hang time.
There you go. Now, that would be a good usage of your time there. How long is the hang time on Aaron Sipos' punt? Who's his competition right now? His
name is Tyler Zentner. So, and I think what's interesting is, I watched them both in the OTA practices we were allowed, and the feedback we got was that it was 50-50. Like, both guys did what they were supposed to do. They both had high points, both had some punts they'd like back. So you would call it neck and neck. So if they finish camp at neck and neck, if you're the Eagles, wouldn't it make more sense to go with Tyler Zentner? Because at least this guy's young and you may feel like you can coach him up. He can also kick. And you've got years to try to mold it. Whereas Sipos has already been with you for a few years. And if it's neck and neck, you may feel like you've already reached your peak with Aaron Sipos. And here's a guy who's already just as good, but in his first year, obviously the money and the finances will play a factor in that too.
Geoff Mosher, tomorrow, they all report to camp. You can check out InsideTheBirds.com for all their pre-training camp coverage and check out the Inside the Birds podcast. A freshie is out today. Check it out with Adam and Jeff. Adam's here tomorrow. Jeff's back on Wednesday. And Football at 4 has you all the way through the Eagles season here on the Sports Bash. Moshe, thanks, buddy.
You got it, Mike. Take care.
And Geoff Mosher, like all guests, appeared via the Elite Acura hotline. Visit Elite Acura during the summer performance event located on Route 73 North in Maple Shade, online at eliteacura.com.